Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another insightful episode of Inago's podcast, Research and Beyond, which is an interactive podcast series that explores the latest advances in the field of STM industry. My name is Dr. KK. The long name is Dr. Krishna Kumar Venkatachalam, and I'm your host for today's episode. And this episode is titled Beyond the Buzz: What Ethical AI Use Really Means for Publishing. And I'm very excited to introduce Randy Townsend, the Director of Engagement at Origin Editorial. And Randy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Dr. KK. I'm excited for the conversation.
We are always excited to have insightful conversations. So before we go ahead, Randy, I would like to quickly plug the social media outlets that we have. So whoever is tuning in live on LinkedIn or YouTube, if you are watching this live, please subscribe to our channel. And on YouTube, obviously, hit the bell notification icon and share. If you like the conversation that Randy and I are about to have, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And you can also find this podcast series and our brand by searching for Research and Beyond by Inago on Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So wherever you find us, please let us know, and you can even send in live questions. If you send us live questions, we'll try to answer. So that's the housekeeping out of the way, Randy. So I've been, as I explained to you in our meeting before the podcast recording itself, I've done some background research for our discussion. So you wear many hats, and I'm very excited because of it. So Director of Publications Operations at Origin Editorial, editor in chief of GW Journal of Ethics in Publishing. So a lot of different roles and everything sort of the intersection of ethics, inclusivity or inclusion, and responsible innovation. So did I get all of that right? And it's such a sort of a interesting mix of things as you explained.
Yeah, you're right. It's a kind of a gumbo, right? You've
Well,
done
well.
everything. Um, but the focal point really is research integrity, right?
Right.
You want to make sure that everything that we're doing makes sense, is done responsibly.
Hmm.
Research is actually true because it's vetted by, responsible processes that are transparent and make sense. The people that are involved in it are protected and safe to engage in every way possible. So yeah, I think you hit it right. I would just add that I also teach ethics and publishing at George Washington University as well.
Excellent, excellent. So I think we have already covered. Is there anything other than whatever we have just talked about that you would like to let the audience know so that they understand your background a little better?
Not. I'm sure it'll come out generically.
Sure, sure, sure. So yeah, so as we briefly explained, what we are trying to discuss is the role of artificial intelligence, AI, in scholarly publishing. So we will generally, I mean, we have a very loose outline, Randy. So if, I'm just going to sort of keep these broad points, and I'm going to ask you some questions. So we have to talk about the overview, how where we are, especially in the context of ethical aspects of AI and the growing influence of AI tools for research purposes and researchers using a lot of AI. But are they using it ethically? So this is our first main talking point. So let me start asking you. So what when you look at this, the ethics of the of using AI tools for any sort of research content creation, where do you stand and what are your concerns?
Yeah, so first I always I lead with trust. Our industry is predicated on trust and I like to think that anyone that's engaging in our activities, they're trying to do it the right way. AI is still relatively new in the way that we've been using it and talking about it. I held a session at the George Washington University Ethics and Publishing Conference maybe about 5 years ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
pulled a panel of experts together that were outside of the publishing industry, but they were AI leaders in that kind of conversation. I want them to talk to us about the questions we should be asking ourselves. We're having conversations here or there, but not as an industry. We weren't really talking about AI. And I want to be sure that, the conversations we're having outside of our industry, we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to consider and adapt. And particularly, it is with protecting our content because the challenges that we're having with AI aren't necessarily new challenges. It's just accelerated because of how fast AI accelerates things. And it's very pervasive, it's everywhere. Um, so the need for guardrails, rules, to tell authors this is how you could use AI.
Mm-hmm.
These are the tools that we recommend you using, or this is how we suggest you apply this technology or these tools to improve what it is you're doing and make your job easier.
Mm-hmm.
And simultaneously, for us as publishers, how can we leverage these features to make our jobs easier and improve the experience for all the stakeholders, whether it's an author submitting a paper
Right.
or their research or a peer reviewer who may be juggling a whole lot of things and has a very specific amount of time. How can we make things easier for them or the editors in terms of scrutinizing papers that may or may not be within the scope of their journal?
Mm-hmm.
So, having these discussions, I think, will help us at least understand how we as an industry want to engage with AI,
Mm-hmm.
but also, those guardrails for those bad actors that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be able to identify bad behavior hopefully quicker and neutralize it, even faster than we've been doing so far.
Well, you covered a lot of interesting points. I mean, I'm so happy and glad that you belong to the group that believes in the fact that if you want to summarize the one theme that that maintains what academic research should be, that is trust. The trust in the fact that researchers and scientists and let's say clinicians and doctors, if you want to go to the medicines that are doing it honestly and the findings that they are publishing are trustworthy for the public as well as for policymakers. And eventually that is what we need to uphold. The industry needs to take proactive measures in upholding the integrity and the trust in the output. So that you covered, and you also covered researchers, editors, as well as peer reviewers, the three key stakeholders. And we have already touched on guardrails and using AI ethically. But before I move on to our next broad point, you mentioned that you teach a course, and some of the things that we have noted, we in the sense Inago has noted, and as part of the Inago Academy brand as well as our services brand, is that a lot of researchers, the AI has sort of come in, like barged in into their lives, and they are struggling to understand how they can use it, and they want some sort of help in terms of knowing what is right and what is not. So, when you're teaching your course, do students also come to you or raise such questions that they are not sure what they can do or they cannot do?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just doing a reflection at the beginning of this current semester, and there were iterations of my guidance to them on the use of AI. And at first, I was really adamant, like, no, you cannot use AI in what you do. And the next year, I was saying, if you use AI, you can use it, this here, for this particular reason or that particular reason. And now it's, I expect you to use AI, but you have to disclose how much AI you're using.
Right.
Um, and I also want to understand where the AI stops and your voice picks up, because the point of this education is your critical thinking. But we're in a world where we can't really separate from AI anymore. So yes, you're going to use it. How you use it, I'm interested in knowing. I don't want to be so prescriptive because I
Mm-hmm.
do to have the freedom and leverage to play around with it. The more
Mm.
we play around with and experiment with it, the less scary it becomes, and the more we understand both how we could and should use it, but also how people who should not be trusted
Mm-hmm.
could and could use it and compromise the integrity of that trust and the integrity of the research.
Right, right. So you mentioned that they want to know this, but do they think that the responsibility of, let's say, knowing this should come, as in the sense, that the teachings or the guidelines should come from, let's say, themselves or their peer groups or institutions that they do their research in, or maybe even publishers? Do they have an opinion regarding this?
Yeah, I think they're looking for guidance,
Right,
you know. And I turn to the broader universities guidance, but also I pay attention very much to what the industry is saying and how policies are evolving or what new tools are out
right.
there. One thing that there's so many different applications for AI.
Mhm.
So if it's going to be inserted into a workflow, for example, I want the students to think about what problem is it solving in the workflow.
Right.
Don't just bring in AI because you want everything to run faster. Think of the specific problem you want to use and think about the implications.
Right.
And that's how you start having those ethical deliberations that way, to see how it impacts the different stakeholders involved. It may work great for peer reviewers, but it may be terrible for the authors.
Yes. So that's an interesting point. I never thought of it like that in terms of a technology being bad for one group or one key stakeholder group. But I mean, we both, I guess, we have a consensus that we need to have consistent standards in terms of AI use and integration. And we already are talking about AI education. So in your course, you're teaching ethics. Is that not right? Or
Ethics in publishing.
ethics in publishing, but does that have now a dedicated, let's say, I don't know, module, if I'm not or some like the stress on AI use in the context of ethics in publishing has risen, right, in the last 4 5 years, as in it tremendously. And probably the course entire, there could be a separate course for AI ethics in publishing as well. So how much does your current sort of syllabus cover AI assistance in the context of ethics in publishing?
Yeah, it's a big part of the technology
Right.
aspect. So I don't separate it from the technology piece because I believe it's all related. These different tools, accessibility becomes part of the conversation. But absolutely, it started off as a small piece
Hmm.
of the overall technology conversation, but now it's really dominating that particular part. And I've infused elements of AI in other aspects of it, whether the section on peer review now
Hmm.
also has a mention on how can we leverage AI to find more reviewers and reduce reviewer fatigue and reduce the burden on editors. So there's it's so many different applications that it's more a piece of every single conversation, if even a mention for a couple of questions in the lectures.
Right. Excellent. So, let's talk about we talked about guardrails, which I would believe that they are similar to in terms of frameworks, and what I'm leading to, segueing to, is would be the STM associations, work, the wonderful work that they've been doing. If I believe that you have already seen some of these. I think in late December 2023, if I'm not mistaken, STM Association came up with their, I think, second in their series of the use of generative AI in publishing. And that basically said who can use what and when and how. It was a broad thing, it was not like very prescriptive or detailed. The one thing that took me by surprise, because at that point in time, I was also starting to sort of use generative AI tools for my own needs. For example, if I'm reading a research paper to understand some aspects of technology that eventually we can put into use for creating solutions for, let's say, a researcher, for example. So I'm trying to process that article because it might be a, let's say, a lengthy archive preprint or something like that, and with technical terminology that are beyond my grasp, because I come from a medicine background, and sometimes I'm looking at the intersection of, let's say, language and technology in terms of research. So I started using generative AI to process some of these things. As a purely as an assistant purpose, so that I can get to know it better, and I believe that that's perfectly ethical for anybody to do that. But what caught me by surprise when I read that report is that because the copyright or the intellectual property rights are not with you, the end user, they are with either the author or the publisher, depending on the licensing model. They, as in the STM Association at that point in time, said that nobody who does not have copyrights to any text content is free to use, as in to upload or copy paste or whatever, the file onto a generative AI platform. And I thought it was, I mean, I hadn't thought of it, and I want to know what your thoughts are in terms of such use, because in my opinion, we are generally a very sort of, I guess, a Western sort of focused technology. Whenever you're looking at it, English, for example, is a primary language of communication. But in terms of accessibility across the globe, there are researchers who might actually find such assistance very useful in terms of doing legitimate, honest research work, so that they can build or make trustworthy research output. So let me ask you this: what do you think? Where do you stand in terms of researchers using, let's say, something that they would read from a library or a journal? Can they? Do you think that they can as in legitimately use it in AI tools to understand it better, or reading assistance, deep reading, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, there's a thousand benefits for those reasons
Mm,
exactly. I can remember, many years ago, I was working on a translation for research in the Congo, and we did a translation from English to French, and we brought in a translator to help. It was a really really thick volume of research that we had to do, so it took couple of years to complete this. When it was done, the researchers in that region, I mean, they were so excited
mhm,
because we showed them a certain level of respect. We wanted to make sure they understood what was happening in their region,
mhm.
and we went through all the effort and trouble to do this. Now, if we had AI at the time to leverage, we could have saved ourselves a lot of time. And not that anything was imminent, but some things are time sensitive, right? So you want to be
Right,
able to make information available as quickly as possible. So, there's a lot of opportunities to leverage those benefits of speed and accuracy and quality,
right.
in those ways. Um, this is one of those fun ethical deliberations that I'd love to talk about because you are running into existing guardrails, like you talk about copyrights,
Right.
who can do what, and then what happens to it as you're feeding it into the AI, and does it get lost into
Mhm.
world, the universe, and the person who own the rights, do they have any recourse?
Right, right.
Some of those things are going to be negotiated going forward, and I think when we bump into these ethical scenarios, it'll help us write better policy and rules to help
Mm.
us figure out how can we do this and make sure everyone is respected for what their contributions are, what they own.
Right, right, right. I mean, I listen to tech podcasts and they also have these deliberations and their discussions, debates about, what is ethically right in the copyright sense. Because if you're reading something, Randy, I'm sure, let's say you're reading a research, somebody else's copyright, let's say publisher's copyright, but you're still reading it, your brain is processing it, and you are probably taking some ideas away from it, which will probably help your own research. An example. Now, there is no copyright limitations to this sort of a transaction or this information flow. So if you're ethically using AI ethically in the sense that you are not using it in a let's say unlegitimized or non-permissible way, and you're still using it to sort of help you with whatever you would have done without the help of a tool. I personally believe that it is fine and it should be the way forward. But there are different. I mean, from a copyright point of view, from a publisher perspective, obviously there are challenges because what if the generative AI brand that we're using, let's say OpenAI, uses the content for training. So that definitely is not permissible. So I think that the negotiations and the conversations have to happen. Not with the between the end user and the AI company or the publisher, but between publishers and AI companies and maybe governments, so that all the things can be set in place, so that the end user, which can be the researcher, which is the researcher in this context, can legitimately have the assistance that they require.
Yeah, funny. I was we just had the Society for Scholarly Publishing's annual conference last week, and I attended a session, and they it was on AI as a matter of fact, and they had a couple of attorneys that were at the table, talking about the session, and we were talking about the ethics of of using AI, and one of the attorneys he said, I agree, ethically these things can be done, but it comes down to whether or not it's legally the
Mhm.
right thing to do.
Right,
And if you have, where you and I may apply our morals and values
right,
to come up with, to be on an ethical side. If it's not legal, that's the end of the
right,
conversation right there,
right,
and that's where
right.
you really start see the need for the negotiations.
Right, right, right. We took a detour with the STM Association thread, but that's okay. That's part of conversations and podcasts. So let me ask you: a month ago, the STM Association had another draft report, basically classifying the types of AI assistants, starting with things like grammar checking, going all the way up to get generating research data. In the sense, AI generated data with obviously transparency that it is AI generated, obviously. So that is the length. I think there are nine categories. So did you? So the STM Association now they published it. I think it was until the end of May that they invited readers and the industry stakeholders to give feedback. And I thought I was so happy to see it because I finally saw some sort of a structure. Because everything, if the structure, as you rightly said, guardrails and frameworks and everything, if you have a structure that's easier for humans to communicate with each other, that's one thing. But machines need the frameworks even more, so they will start understanding things better once you have this. So where are you with this, and what are your thoughts on such a sort of measure in terms of classifying AI assistants?
Yeah, I think it was a really great step forward. So many things, so many scenarios are out there that, you try to give someone advice. It's like, well, what does that mean? What does this look like? So,
Mm.
they had these scenarios and they gave examples. So we're definitely moving in the right direction, and I
Mhm.
was inspired to see it. One thing that I'd be interested in seeing more of is the human intervention piece.
Right.
um, at what point does the human get involved? Because I do believe that we can't just let the AI can't we can't just take our hands off the steering
Mm.
wheel and just let the AI run. There does need to be some kind of QC or validity check
Right.
to make sure that it is what it is or supposed to be.
Mm.
There was an example in the framework about the AI generating an image of people farming in an ancient society.
Mhm.
It's one thing that stuck out to me because I want to see, who is making sure that the time period, for example, is captured accurately.
Right.
There needs to be someone there that's checking for to make sure that the culture and tradition elements are respected and reflected appropriately. And
Mhm.
no one's wearing an Apple Watch, for example. And, it's those little things that we want to let the AI run and make our jobs easier, but you still need
Yeah.
somebody. And that was one thing I didn't necessarily see in this, in this classification. Not that
Right.
not to pick the classification apart. Again,
Mm.
I think it's tremendous.
Right.
It's gonna add tremendous value, but I think maybe in the future iteration, we
Mm.
might need to see something like that that would be useful.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned the Apple Watch. I think the classical thing is when you're doing a period or historical drama or even a fantasy. For example, Game of Thrones. You have a set where accidentally a smartphone or something from the current day gets captured within a shot, which nobody cares unless you have a magnifying glass and you're sitting in front of Netflix or whatever it Hulu Plus or whatever. But the point is, from an AI point of view, what AI struggles with, especially with related to images, is to get the human anatomy right in terms of like fingers. And the other thing, until last week, I think AI could not spell in generated images. It could never spell anything right. So I am scared of the fact that if suppose researchers start using it, and they will have typos that nobody can fix because nobody will even understand why there are typos. So that's a concern for me. But anyway, so that's an interesting point. I never thought of an Apple Watch being created in a history scene, like farmers in Mesopotamia or something, wearing an Apple Watch and looking at their steps and everything. That'll be interesting. So pivoting from that point, the communication aspects. You mentioned that SCM Association has done a lot of things right, but in terms of the industry, let's say in this case, it's an organization that is establishing the frameworks, but it is also the responsibility of the rest of the stakeholders, including, let's say, publishers, as well as maybe vendors or let's say corporates like us in Nago, for example, to ensure that these guidelines are, let's say, established as a standard. Do you think that everybody needs to play a role in this?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just say I'm a publisher and you're a publisher, right? An author comes to me to publish, and they look at my guidelines and say, okay, I check this box, this box, this box because
Mhm.
I allowed it. It goes through my peer review and it gets rejected. But it's maybe it's better scope for your journal. So it goes over your journal, and you look at, the
Yeah.
things that they did, and it's like, oh, you use this kind of AI, which we don't allow, so you're automatically disqualified.
Right.
There's all kinds of gaps that exist if, as an industry, we're not in agreement and alignment
Mm.
with what's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable, what's not. I kind of think towards like COPE. Like
Mhm.
COPE, I won't say every journal subscribes to COPE, but so many journals and publications refer to COPE.
Right.
To say, these are the guidelines that we follow in evaluating considerations of misconduct. if
Right.
we took the same approach, and publishers in general say, yes, we subscribe to this or we're using this as our benchmark, then it starts to close those gaps, and it also sends a signal to those nefarious entities
Actors.
out there to say, wow, this industry is really coming together right now,
Right.
and we're either going to have to dial back or figure out another way to get an in,
Mm.
to kind of break the system. But I think that solidarity is
Mm.
critical.
Right, right. I mean, you mentioned right in the sense that the unfortunate aspect of AI is that it's so powerful in terms of providing genuine researchers the tools and the assistance, but also it in the hands of bad actors, it can be even more amplified. The power that it has into, and it's a double-edged sword and everything. So the negatives can be amplified, but at the same time, an industry stakeholders banding together and establishing this will be a deterrent for any bad actors, which is what we eventually want anyway. All right, so pivoting to our third main point, which is basically from a researcher perspective, sorry. AI assistants can come in various forms and shapes and across the research life cycle, I would say, starting from ideation and brainstorming, then maybe even doing deep literature review, maybe writing these days, then improving what you have written, and then eventually checking for things like technical checks and whatnot, right? So the entire length and breadth of the research cycle can have AI assistance. In your opinion, what is acceptable in the 2nd of June 2025 in this entire thing? I mean, I've listed some things. You can pick up whatever that you think that it's not it should not be allowed in terms of AI assistance, or at least somebody needs to have. For example, you mentioned image generation. Somebody needs to, as a human, let's say an author or a researcher is generating images, it is their responsibility to ensure that the image that is generated is consistent with the historical aspects, for example, agrarian society, right? So where do you draw the line as what is acceptable in on the 2nd of June 2025?
Do I have to draw a line?
Well, these days everybody loves drawing lines.
I mean, I think that there's so many things that are possible, and I know you're saying as of today. So as of today, I do have a few things that are kind of off limits, but
Mm.
I'm thinking 5 years from now, those same things may not be off limits.
Right.
And some things are a little bit more, I guess, controversial. For example, peer review. I do not think that AI should be a peer reviewer
Right.
right now today.
Right.
Um, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, could AI be a peer reviewer? If you think about the challenges with peer review, oh no, peer review is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, AI may not make it perfect either. So we may have,
Yeah.
a system that reduces reviewer fatigue, contributes to, the enterprise, and can still add value.
Mm-hmm.
As long as again there needs to be that human intervention that says, okay, I see what maybe they check the references, maybe they check, certain aspects of it. So how do we use AI,
Mm-hmm.
certain things? Um, Going back to the researcher,
Mm-hmm.
which was your primary question,
Right.
I think idea generation is perfect, perfect place to get started for a researcher. I don't know that they should be the sole, um, they should bear the sole responsibility of authorship,
Mm-hmm.
because if something goes wrong, who's accountable?
Right.
Who do you go to and say, hey, you got this wrong, let's fix this. We'll apply this penalty to who?
Mm-hmm.
To the AI. That doesn't really um, go too far. And also you have to think who's getting the research grant to conduct
Mm.
in the first place. Who's funding the research, right? It's not the technology. So it has to be an author, a human author, that needs to not just do I think the bulk of what the actual research output is,
Right.
um, and a team of so. And the question should really be, how can we use this AI to help us in some of the, maybe the smaller tasks. Maybe it is we'll take all this data that you have and turn it into a table
Mm-hmm.
that a human will go back and check and make sure that yes, these numbers are right, the tables are aligned appropriately.
Right. Right.
Uh, yeah.
So that's interesting. So I've drawn my own line on my little notebook here, and on one side we have idea generation and brainstorming and formatting, let's say text and content, and on the other side, non-permissible side, you currently think that peer review, for example, as a peer reviewer, and authorship, obviously. I mean, these are. I mean, I don't even have any points to debate this. I am with you on this, but let me ask you this: where do you stand in terms of the need for disclosure? For example, let's say I'm a researcher, I'm going to submit to the journal that you are an editor in. Is it my responsibility, in your opinion, to state that my research idea, I spent a lot of time chatting to, let's say, Gemini, and I came up with a research idea which eventually I worked on and developed. I take complete ownership of it. But do you think I should clearly state what I did at what stage, and also give details such as, the model that I used, or the prompt that I used? So where do you stand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of goes back into trust, right? And at a time where there's so much misinformation, disinformation, that's out there, we want to reassure the public that they can still trust us.
Right.
So, the more we disclose up front, and I do put that to the author or researcher, maybe it's part of their data management plan, maybe it's part of the requirements for their grant,
Hmm.
to really specify, we use this kind of AI, this version, this
Right.
year, for this particular
Right.
purpose. And just like I mentioned, I hold my students accountable. Tell me, how much of it, was composed by AI versus where your voice takes over.
Right.
Maybe the AI helps summarize and help create a couple of sentences that are in the abstract. Like,
Right.
be transparent and be clear about it. Don't let us find out by accident, through an investigation,
Right.
because then we have compromised trust, right?
Right. 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 Perfect. So, you've naturally led us to the next question. So, the framework point that we started talking about, and we touched on the STM Association's terminology classification. Now, one of the key points in that document is that publishers and journals, and publishers, if you want to group them together, they do not have consistency. And honestly, I was not aware of it until I did some research myself. Randy, I analyzed, I think, a few publishers, not at the journal level, at the publisher level, and things are so all across the, in spectrum, in terms of what some publishers still do not allow AI assistance. In the sense, the thing that you and I currently agree on what is permissible, they do not allow it. And there are, in terms of what, you cannot simply say AI assisted for research outputs or whatever. That's very vague. What It's completely different when somebody uses, let's say, some DALI or something like that, mid journey, to create a research image, as opposed to they use a grammar checker to improve the text, right? So some the publishers have a very vast sort of discrepancies, inconsistencies in terms of what they disclose on their websites, on their pages, as well as what they expect the authors to do. So my question to you is this: how important is it for publishers to all sort of get together in whatever way that we can, as an industry, to have some sort of consistency established, so that the researchers who are doing the hard work in terms of trying to do the research and publishing it, and helping the society in the way, so they get the assistance and the clarity that is required while they can use AI assistance?
Yeah, it is fundamentally important. It's so critical that we come up with these, well, we have these conversations in a collaborative way. We publish in a global environment. And there may be reasons why you see some variations related to a particular government's rules and regulations.
Right.
But if we're truly serving global research,
Mm.
then we should throw everything on the table
Right.
and start, kind of working back. I think in general we agree on a lot of what we should do.
Mm.
It's when you get into those details that we start deviating, and we're not giving a clear signal to the authors or the readers, or anyone else that's looking for the value we're supposed to be providing, because it seems like as an industry we're unsure of what we're
Hmm.
doing.
Right.
So I think it's an opportunity to have these conversations that bring in as many publishers as possible. Maybe, maybe we start the bigger ones. Maybe no. Maybe we start with the smaller society publishers because
Right,
they might be a little bit more in tune with their communities and understand the needs of what their communities, the needs and expectations of those communities, right? So they can
right.
weigh into the conversations and help drive, that more broad collaborative experience.
Right, 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 right. I mean, you perfectly put it. Is the human nature is that we do not like change, and this is a huge change in the in our entire society itself. And at the societal level, change takes time in terms of it getting finally sort of absorbed and the society reacting to it. And I believe publishers are the same. So they are struggling. They don't not want to do it, but there's a lot of things to be done. And there are obviously other challenges in the publishing industry. We are just not talking about AI in ethics and in publishing alone, right? So I guess it's just taken a longer than what I would have liked. But I'm selfish because you can consider me as a researcher, or somebody who is not working for a publisher. So I want publishers to band together and fix it right now, but it'll probably take longer. But having said that, so I have a question to you. You mentioned very importantly global, the global aspect, the geographies, the governments. There are different subject areas and there are different types of publishers. For example, society publishers as opposed to big corporate publishers, right? So is it utopian or unrealistic to expect the same standards across all these variations in the publisher journal landscape?
I'm an optimist, so I would say no to that question. I don't think it's unrealistic. I think what we need to do is avoid having a list of 100 things.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I just think of the author journey, and in my experience, if you give a author instructions, generally authors don't read the instructions. They think they know what they're gonna do. They go ahead and submit.
Right.
Then they get these notices like, no, you missed this, this, and this. So
Mm.
we're shaking our finger at them, reprimanding them for what they didn't do, and then they go back and then they check the boxes and submit it again. If you have a list of 100 things related to AI that we expect, they'll the same thing. You have the same results, and it'll be in a different scenario. We've had another opportunity that we fumbled to do it right.
Yeah.
I think from a global perspective, knowing all of the different nuances that could be involved, if we can align around 10 things
Mm-hmm.
and give the publishers from there a degree of leniency to, kind of regulate based off those 10 tenets.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that we have a strong framework that we can all feel good about that allows us to be proactive. We can
Mm-hmm.
go and do some proactive engagement with authors. We can do case studies and town halls to show them what this would look like, what this means to them, and how this can improve their experience, as opposed to authors being continuously frustrated with
Right.
unusually large amount of expectations.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, I completely agree with you on this point. In fact, I do not know if you're aware, Inago is actually part. We are starting a movement which is titled "Responsible Use of AI," and the idea is to just provide a sort of a interface or a website for the researchers as well as for publishers to understand what is it that they're stating in terms of the acceptable use of AI assistance, for example, and if publishers are interested in looking at whatever they are doing right now, they can quickly sort of realize, okay, this is where maybe I need to catch up, and this is what the other publishers are doing, and maybe make changes to their guidelines faster, so that if our goal eventually is to communicate the fact that there is a lot of responsibility across the stakeholder spectrum in terms of ensuring ethics, for ensuring research integrity, and also for ensuring trust in the research outputs, right? So we are just a facilitator, and this is what we are also very passionate, and we are doing that. I believe that we are coming out with a website with the you mentioned 10 sort of tenets. I think we are basing this on what the STM association has already started wonderfully well, but we are adding the differentiation between what is allowed, versus what is allowed and needs to be disclosed. Because that is another sort of line that everybody needs to, remember that they have to do it. So I hope that you and your friends and whoever you work with also will take part in this movement, and we are excited for it. I hope that you are excited as much as I am in terms of the responsible AI movement. Okay, so one other point before we come to the end. The You mentioned this actually, but I thought we should touch on the publisher aspect before we go here. So you mentioned in the context of that image generated agrarian society, historical, that it's the responsibility of the author to do this. And currently, as you also mentioned, the COPE, which is Committee of Publication Ethics, and their authorship statement. This is a gold standard that I've always considered in terms of authorship. So, what I think you'll agree with me that the onus and the responsibility of checking the accuracy of any content in your manuscript lies with the author. It has always been with the author. Now, with the addition of AI assistants and the responsibility of checking whether whatever AI has done, the post AI output, whatever it can be assistance, can be generation, whatever it can be, it's still clearly lies with the author. Like everybody is aware of it, but it's implied and it's not explicitly stated. And some aspects of education that I find lacking in the researcher or the institutions is that many researchers sort of think that if they use AI, it's not their responsibility to check every word. For example, in this context, if you're creating some content, it's not their responsibility because they trust AI. AI is very convincing in terms of what it says it can do, and it can hallucinate and whatnot, right? So where are you with in the context of this point? Where are you in the to state that it is the responsibility of all the stakeholders to educate the researcher or the in this case editors and reviewers as well, you can include anybody who uses AI, that it is their responsibility to ensure that whatever that they use, the output that comes across is, if they are going to use it in any form or fashion in the entire research cycle, it is their responsibility to check the accuracy.
Yeah, that goes kind of to what I mentioned before about the continued education. It needs to be proactive. Um, you mentioned before about the images,
Yeah.
generating, and I remember I did this thing where the guy's elbow had another hand as opposed to the elbow, so he had like three hands. Um, and you zoom out, you don't see it, but then you start to make it bigger. Like, wait a minute, that elbow is looks kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's those things to say. I would love to just let it go and say that I'm done, but we need to be more disciplined and take more pride in our work,
Mm,
and recognize that this tool, as exciting as it is, it's something that helps.
mhm.
It's not going to replace me. And once you let it replace you, then what value are you bringing to the conversation anymore?
Right.
I think the publishers have an opportunity to educate their community.
Mhm.
I've been involved in a lot of policy change conversations with editorial boards, which trickle backs into the community that we publish, in different ways. So making sure that these conversations are available in different ways, and maybe every year you have something related to it, or you invite people to a virtual town hall, so that you can hear the latest updates
Mhm.
on policy or practice concerns. Like I said, case studies before, I think is a great way for people to understand, like, oh, this is what this thing means, and this is what I should be looking for,
Right.
or this
Right.
is how I can integrate this into what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Really, we're telling them how they can use it to improve their activities in a way that's acceptable to us, that we can trust that it's you did all these things and now we can publish. I think they being the researcher will be much happier right now, if we were proactively telling them this is
Mm.
what you can do and this is why it's important.
Right. 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 Excellent. You summarized it very well, and we will shortly share communication maybe with you as well separately to sort of clue you in as to what the movement and its detail and everything. Before we end the podcast, one quick thing I just realized that you mentioned, behind the door or the line that I drew on my page. You are not letting peer review as an assistance in peer review. I guess peer reviewer AI cannot be a peer reviewer, which is where I also stand. But I also want to quickly sort of inform you that I personally am working with the product team in if in Nago. Our product is called Trinka. You probably have seen it. Trinka is the leading academic writing assistant, and we take pride in building things responsibly and with AI guardrails and everything. So we are trying to extend that into providing an assistant peer review assistant workspace with complete human oversight. So the idea is that just like how you said, reviewer fatigue, the volumes and everything. So we need to have some assistance given to the reviewers. And what we are hoping to do is to obviously with all the solid guardrails and ethical, deployment and the use of the right language models, copyright and all of that, with all of that, cleanly taken care of, we are providing an assistant, peer review assistant kind of a product, which will help the peer reviewer surface the most important information within the manuscript that they're reviewing, as well as in the research area, whatever that they might need. We are offering all sorts of sort of helping tools in the workspace, so that when they actually end up doing their review, it'll be high quality with a lot of source based or evidence based responses, apart from obviously making things faster. So everything will be 100% human oversight, in the sense that whatever they will write, like how we just discussed, that even if they are using the AI assistant, it is the peer reviewer's responsibility to make sure that whatever it has shown and they have accepted is the right thing. So we are ensuring all of that, and we are hoping to have this product come out late this year, and I'm very excited about it. And as soon as we have something to show, I'll definitely write you a note, and maybe I can show it to you myself.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really exciting. Like I said, as of today, it cannot be a peer reviewer, but it
Right.
could possibly help exactly what you're saying. And
Yeah.
5 years from now, you take this step right now, which sounds like it's a tremendous step forward, and answers a lot of questions like how could we use AI?
Yeah.
You're creating an opportunity to answer that question. And then 5 years from now, what does this look like? It's exciting. It's very
I
exciting. I can't wait to see what it looks like, and I hope I can play around with it a little bit.
Yes, yes. Hopefully, very soon. Just to bring this episode to a close, so what we've discussed, overarching thoughts or themes, would be that we need to we obviously research in the research ecosystem, trust and integrity is very important, and in the context of AI assistance, both for researchers or all the stakeholders as well as for developers who are creating solutions, it is very important to balance innovation and the assistance of the innovation with responsibility, that you are responsible for whatever you're doing, whether you're using it for creating research outputs or you're building a product to help researchers do the same. And this responsibility is shared across all the stakeholders, and everybody needs to come together and eventually establish a sort of a simple enough framework for a researcher or any stakeholder for that matter to refer to and use AI responsibility. So this is the sort of a summary. Do you have any further thoughts to add to this?
Yeah, like I mentioned, this is a global conversation, and I think that it's an opportunity for us to really um, take a stand. Like this is who we are, and say these are things that we find acceptable or not. I think once we start defining those within
Mm.
ourselves as a community, then it's easier to have for us to have these conversations with our stakeholders, and they'll understand that there's alignment, that we've come to this through a lot of conversations to get it as right as possible.
Right.
And it'll be iterative because AI is still evolving. So our use of it, and its existence in our industry and ecosystem is going to continue to evolve. So, these conversations are going to be very much active.
Yeah. Hopefully, this conversation that you and I are having on this podcast is a starting such a conversation, starting conversation that'll help move things forward. And as always, I when I'm host of for Research and Beyond, I always learn, I take away a lot of things. And today you gave me a lot of perspectives, and I learned a lot during the course of this podcast. And I'm sure that our listeners and the viewers also learned. And I don't think we have any questions coming in from the live audience yet. So basically, we are sort of winding down. So before I leave you, Randy, is there anything that you would like to talk about, promote, maybe your social media, or anything that you're passionate about that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, one thing I would just mention, it's not so much AI related, but it's
Mm-hmm.
more focused is just mental health. I've really been, having conversations to support individuals' mental health, and when the world seems to be moving fast, it could produce a lot of different feelings and mixed emotions. I just want to make sure that people who are listening and seeing things like AI or innovation, if you're feeling anxious about it, I would encourage you first to make sure you're taking care of yourself. But two, there's so much potential here, so much to be excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is written in stone right now. We're all writing this together, and we have an opportunity to figure out like what's the next 5 years going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone listening has a part to play in that. So lean towards the potential if at all you can, but make sure you take care of yourself.
Yeah. What a beautiful message. Is if somebody wants to get in touch with you, maybe on LinkedIn or something, can you share your LinkedIn ID? Is
Yeah. I don't know how we necessarily share it.
what should they search for, or any
um,
social media that you, let's say, maybe I don't know, Blue Sky or something like that, whatever that you are on.
I have a limited presence on Blue Sky,
Mm.
but LinkedIn is where you'll most likely find me, Randy Townsend, MPS. You can find me there. Yeah, and if you have a question or comment or just want to talk shop, I'm happy to do. I love talking shop. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So Randy has already sort of plugged his social media. So it's my turn to plug Inago and research and beyond social media. So once again, like how I started, if you are watching this on YouTube live streamed or on LinkedIn, please subscribe to the channels, or add us as a friend on LinkedIn, and hit the bell notification icon so that when Inago goes live with research and beyond the next time, you get a notification. As well as, if you found the conversation about ethics and responsibility, responsible use of AI between myself and Randy interesting, please share it with somebody in your friend circle who might actually benefit from this conversation. And if you're listening to us on any podcasting app, please rate us 5 stars so the algorithm can push us up. So, and also, Research and Beyond is a brand. You can search for it on any social media, including places like Twitter, and I guess even Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram. And if you find us there, please let us know what you thought of this episode. So that brings us to the end of the another episode of Research and Beyond. I had a lot of fun. I hope Randy, you also had a lot of fun
Yeah, yeah,
talking.
absolutely. And I realize you're such better at promoting yourself than I am of me. I'm as you're talking, I'm like I could have said oh so many different things. I didn't say anything. I blew it.
It just needs practice, and that's what I'm saying. I've been doing podcasts for maybe